Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Reimagined, a Hidden Compass YouTube series. I am your host, Lauren Eckert, and I am so thrilled to be joined today by my friend Pramodh Yapa. Pramodh is a PhD student at the University of Alberta, a physicist, an avid science communicator, an adventurer, a swing dancer, a musician, and an all-around fantastic human. I'm really excited to have Pramodh here today. He is notably also the winner of the prestigious 2018 Dance Your PhD contest. We'll make sure to link that in bio so everyone can see that. And Pramodh is also a dear friend who I'm lucky to have spent many hours in the cold, dark bellies of caves of Vancouver Island with. So welcome, Pramodh. I'm stoked to have you.
Oh, Lauren, it's such a pleasure to be on here and also just chat with you. I'm excited to see where the conversation will go.
Totally. So, Pramodh, as we talked before, hit and record this month for the Reimagined series, after talking with a lot of people about, the heavy legacy of exploration and words like exploration and discovery, towards reimagining new ways to do that or reimagining new words to describe those actions. We want to talk a little bit with folks who are stepping outside of comfort zones when it comes to research and storytelling and the like. And so you came to mind as someone with a lot of great science communication experience and also who actively in your work in physics sort of is engaged in discovery about things that we don't typically talk or think about when we talk about discovery in sort of the broad public sense. And so, yeah, we're going to be talking with scientists, storytellers, and adventurers who are escaping their comfort zones or perhaps creating new ones for themselves. And before we launch into talking about your work in the science telling, storytelling sphere, can you tell us a little bit about your research?
Absolutely. I work in an area called condensed matter physics, which is not really the most well-known area of physics. Like everyone knows about particle physics, which is maybe through the activities of this place called CERN and the LHC, where they collide. They have this massive ring, like 30 kilometers in diameter, and they collide particles together to see what the smallest units of matter are. And then there are people who study black holes and stuff that are very large instead of going to the very smallest objects in the universe. People study the largest objects in the universe. And I study stuff that's more kind of smack dab in the middle there. So it's not the smallest units of matter or the large black holes and universe kind of stuff. I'm more interested in how collections of things like particles, electrons, neutrons, atoms can come together and make things that are a little bit, larger than the sum of their parts. So states of matter are kind of what I study, but going beyond the four that we learn about in, I guess, grade school, where we learn solids, liquids, yeah, I almost forgot the other ones, gases, plasma, which are, I guess, the standard ones. And we go beyond those and explore thousands of new states of matter. And my work has to do with a state of matter called a superfluid, which is a state of matter that has zero friction in it or viscosity in it. And the way I like to explain it is when you take a cup of coffee in the morning and you sugar in there, you create a whirlpool as you stir your sugar into your coffee. And that little whirlpool lasts like a fraction of a second after you stop stirring. Now, if you did that with your superfluid, which not everyone has access to, but imagine you had a cup of superfluid in your morning cup. And if you gave it a stir, what you would see is dramatically different in the sense that the whirlpool that you would create with your stirring would last indefinitely. You could stare at it for 10 seconds, it'll still be going. 100 seconds, it'll still be going, and centuries would pass, and you would still have a whirlpool in your cup of superfluid. And that's the general kind of area I work in. And maybe I can get into this a little later, but a paper I recently put out explores something that's added on top of the superfluid behavior, something called a superfluid crystal. So it's something that behaves like both a liquid and a solid at the same time. So it's some really new state of matter that we're still only beginning to explore. And so that's what my PhD research is on, this kind of new state of matter that is both a liquid and a solid at the same time.
Thanks so much for that condensing of all you do Pramodh into a very accessible explanation. I, for one, appreciate it. Oh, excuse me. I am really interested, obviously, to hear more, but also to hear about how you got into this work. You know, I met you when you were doing your master's at the University of Victoria. Now you're pursuing your PhD, so you've obviously been in these arenas for a while. What got you excited about physics and in particular this niche that you find yourself researching?
Yeah, I think, the root of me ending up here is actually with the idea of being a physicist. There's this whole idea of like the what draws people into, being a physicist. It's very hard to understand the nitty gritty of what a physicist does. Like if you ask anyone what a theoretical physicist does, no one really knows, but everyone knows of a theoretical physicist. You know of Einstein, you know of Stephen Hawking. And Stephen Hawking actually was the personality of Stephen Hawking was what drew me into physics. My dad read me like little bits of his book when I was like 4 or 5 years old, as I was, as kind of a bedtime story, but it was about black holes and the universe and how it began. And that kind of stayed with me all throughout my life. And the idea of this community of people who can push around symbols on a page and then somehow discern something about the state of the outside world, of the universe, and anything therein was just this amazing concept to me. It's like, how do you gain knowledge just by doing this mathematical pushing around? So that's what drew me into physics itself. It was like, I want to be in that club. I want to understand how it works. And that's the only reason I got into physics, because I had really no idea what it took to be a physicist or what it took to gain that knowledge. And so all throughout my childhood, I knew I was going to do physics. That's all I ever wanted to do. So I kept on going through university, taking courses, eventually hoping to get to a stage where I could call myself a physicist. I don't know if I'm even there yet, because I'm still like,
You
I
for
feel
sure
like
are. You are.
yeah, it's always like 2 steps away. I'm like, once I get my first paper, I'll call myself a physicist. And it always just feels like a changing, the goalposts keep moving in my mind of like, I still haven't reached where I'm coming. But anyway, that might speak more about my what goes on in my head.
A little imposter syndrome, perhaps.
I mean, that happens to the best of us. I know everyone I've talked to, it feels very similar feelings. And then how I got into condensed matter is actually more a process of elimination and just figuring out what kind of things I like to do. What kind of teams do I like to work with? I tried being a particle physicist because I thought that was like the thing to do when I was an undergrad. Chasing after the tiniest subatomic parts was the coolest thing. But I just figured out I like working with people in small groups. I like being able to have conversations one-on-one with experimentalists. And me as a theorist, I want to build this strong relationship. So this community aspect of doing physics is something I deeply care about. Forming a smaller community instead of feeling like a cog in a big machine sometimes, which is what I felt about particle physics. Now, there's nothing to say bad about particle physics, but it's just about how I like to work in smaller teams. And that's how I find myself in condensed matter physics. Condensed matter works in small teams. My supervisor's group is like 3 people. The experimental groups I collaborate with maximum has like 10 people. And it's just really tight-knit community that I can talk to and just exchange ideas freely. And I think that's more of why I got into exactly the area I was doing it. It's the community, and then being able to do, the things that make physicists just doing math and trying to understand something about an area that no one else has thought of earlier.
Incredible answer, Pramodh. There's so many things I want to like pick apart in there. I love that you brought up the community aspect of your scientific work, because I feel like, one thing when I think about storytelling or science telling or communicating about science in a sort of conventional modern storytelling mold, we're expected to be an individual who has a story about us to share. And what I really love about you bringing up community is that I think more and more, or hopefully more and more, science communication and storytelling is incorporating communities and stories. So much happens beyond the scale of an individual. All of science happens beyond the scale of the individual. And there's often a lot of pressure to mold your story into being about one person. And while
Yeah.
it is inherently about individuals, it's also about the communities we create and the awesome collaborations that come from them. I know anytime I look at a peer reviewed physics paper, the author lists, as someone in conservation science, where we, of course, have big collaborative projects, but nothing near, I think, especially probably particle physics. There'll be
Yeah.
like 50 people on an author list. And it really speaks to how profoundly collaborative most human endeavors are, but especially as we, attempt to garner new knowledge. So I love that you brought that up. I also really appreciate that you mentioned, this interest in pursuing new knowledge. I think one of the areas in which I'm most humbled and recognize how much humans have yet to learn about the world is in many, disciplines in the broader area of physics and quantum physics and particle physics and condensed matter physics. We are still asking what are kind of like fundamental questions about how the world works that we don't have answers to. As someone who's really deep in the applied sciences, while we're often pursuing new knowledge, it's very different. It's with a lot of known unknowns, whereas I feel like in physics you're dealing with like a lot of unknown unknowns, which is really
Yeah.
exciting. So I wonder if you could just speak to really briefly, and then we'll talk about your science communication work, uh, discovery, or I'm looking for another word, the type of work you do to bring to light new knowledge. What drove you to that, and what that looks like in physics? I think we have misconceptions about what discovery looks like in science. And I wonder if you could speak to what it looks like in your life as a scientist.
Yeah. Oh, it's a very hard question, I guess, in general, but also a very hard question in condensed matter because condensed matter feels like this kind of ragtag bunch of people who are doing very different things all the time. I sometimes go to conferences and I have no idea what anyone's talking about, even
Right.
though we're supposed to be doing the same thing, but I have no idea what this person just gave an entire talk about. So I think it's very hard to figure out how exactly to classify this. But I think in physics, everything is a study of how space and time come together to make things. And one of my favorite aspects of doing condensed matter is, instead of talking about space and time in much more these abstract things of just the space-time continuum exists and how does it evolve or something like that. We get to talk about it in very concrete terms, in terms of length scales and time scales. And we apply different tools to different timescale problems. So if I am doing something that happens on very small timescales, things that change on like 0.001 seconds, and it happens in the tiniest nanometer scale problems, versus something that happens on a more human scale, I would apply very different toolkits to that. So I have very different tools to apply to different problems that take place in different length scales of time and length scales of space. And so condensed matter physics is the study of that, of developing different tools for different scales of time and different scales of length. And I think this is very analogous to what we do in our world with normal everyday handmade tools. If you're building a skyscraper versus if you're building a doghouse, you're going to use very different tools. The tools must fit the problem that you're trying to do, and it's the exact same thing in condensed matter, except the tools that we use are much more theory based. So we are able to quantitatively say different things about different scales of objects. So condensed matter has to deal with things that you build up block by block from atoms, or things that are on the scale of human things, like you're trying to figure out how wires work. A wire, you can build a current flowing through a wire that span kilometers. And the same kind of, it falls under condensed matter, but you can also study things on the scale of atoms. So what we're trying to do is build a toolkit that you can apply to different scales of problems. So that's how I think about problems in condensed matter, is you are building mathematical tools, and you can test exactly when your tool fails at a certain length scale or a certain time scale. This is much easier said in this way than actually done. And usually what happens is you retrospectively figure out, oh, this, tool actually only works for this specific problem. And this is why, we've been bashing our head against this wall for 50 years. One example of that is this process thing called superconductivity. Superconductivity is it's a phenomenon much like a superfluid, actually, but instead of like water or a liquid, you think of how current flows in a wire. Superconductors let electrons pass through it without any resistance. So you can, transport current kilometers, thousands of kilometers, without ever losing that energy in the process. And superconductors were discovered early 1900s. And for 50 years, no one could figure out exactly how this is going, like how this is possible. We know the principle of conservation of energy. You can't build things that don't work forever, perpetual motion machines, because you lose energy to the outside world and things will slow down and decay. And somehow in physics, you come up with this system that seems to defy all of that. You can have a perpetual current that would flow in a loop forever without ever slowing down. So this seemed like something that would completely fly in the face of all physics that we know of at our own scale. And then it took 50 years for people to figure out the mathematical tools that would let us figure out why this happens, why it doesn't break all of the known laws of physics. It was because we were applying the wrong tools to it was like we had a massive screwdriver and the little bolt that we were trying to undo was tiny. Obviously, you're not going to be able to do it. So he was figuring out, okay, how do we build a smaller screwdriver that can undo this little screw? And 50 years is how long it took to build that mathematical machinery. So again, rambling answer, but it's about building different tool sets that apply for different problems, and how we're able to classify that exactly using mathematics is what we do. And that's a process of exploration. You're trying out building different kinds of tools, seeing if it fits the problem. If it doesn't, you chuck it and then you try a new mathematical tool.
I don't think it was rambling at all. I think that's such a great encapsulation of so much of why science is exciting, especially in, your realm, and that our five senses as humans on this planet are wonderful and very useful for our evolutionary survival, but there is so much beyond the seen or sensed world that takes so long to figure out, and we have to build, and tools can take all sorts of shapes, technological, theoretical, etc.
Yeah.
But this is so much of what I nerd out about and get really excited about in terms of my own work, like conservation science and solutions and toolkits, quite different tools, but tools nonetheless. Down to, reading the popular science articles about physics, because I am so far away from being a specialist. I can understand most of the language, but I'm still really excited about the unseen things that are yet to be revealed through, tool building or through testing for 50 years and finding nothing that works. It's really exciting stuff. I think it's awesome. So I'm obviously like, you don't need to convert me with storytelling into loving physics. So you still do need to condense your work in a way that, even though I have, scientific degrees, we specialize so quickly that our work becomes really hard for other folks to understand.
Yeah.
So I would love now for you to talk a little bit about, as I've shared, Pramodh does a ton of work in this like science telling, storytelling, science communication space that I find really innovative and inspiring, which includes bringing music and dance to science telling about physics, which I think is so far outside of the realm of most people's comfort zones in science communication, let alone physics. So could you tell us a little bit about that process behind moving towards that as a science communication tool?
Yeah. I mean, I did just stumble upon this space randomly. You know, it's very hard to sometimes explain how this happened, because it was just like, oh, I'm just gonna do this one thing, and then suddenly some bunch of dominoes fell over, and I ended up making a 10-minute mini musical about electrons. Uh, but it's very hard to figure out, okay, what were the steps going into that. But it was more a confluence of many of the interests of my life coming together. And I, thought it would be a fun thing to do with my friends at the end of the day. And it also turned out to be a really good way to actually engage with people who you normally wouldn't get through the traditional media, through modes of science communication. So how I did this dance for PhD, so this was way back in, I guess, 2018. I was working on something called superconductivity, as I said, electrons flowing without resistance through a wire, and that's what I was doing at UVic when we met. And it was just the seed of this idea was that the way superconductivity works is that electrons like to pair up. They pair up, and this is what ultimately leads to superconductivity. And at the same time, I was doing swing dancing, and I was like, wow, isn't it so fascinating that I swing dance, and then I go back to the office and I study basically pair dancing at the microscopic level. And it was just that started, and then it was me also then using my musical background to think about, oh, okay, how could I use this and build the music around it, and then create a cohesive story that tells how superconductivity works using people to represent electrons. Anyway, so that's how Dance for PhD submission ended up, and then I just spiraled from there, and turned out to be one of the most amazing experiences of my life, having that be shown to almost 100,000 people. I actually looked it up on YouTube a couple of days ago. I was like, oh my god, it's so close to 100,000 views on that YouTube video, which blows my mind. 100,000 people interested in how electrons behave when you cool it down to 0.01 degrees above absolute zero. Blows my mind. But sorry, just to get an idea of the question, do you want me to talk about in general science communication and non-traditional modes of it?
Well, you've shared so much just now that I love and want to just celebrate you for. It's such a neat thing. Pramodh is an incredibly talented musician. Some of my best memories include a ukulele and Pramodh singing in the background. And at science communication events, Pramodh and I are lucky to be part of a larger science communication community through ComSciCon and just through friendships and connections with other graduate students and scientists. Oh, my lamp is talking to me. But I think that we share, you can correct me if you disagree, but one thing we share in this community is recognition that as scientists, part of our work is this responsibility to figure out how to share our science. And it's a lot of work, and work that I think is only recently starting to be really rewarded in the academic space. But especially in the era we live in, where there's a lot of misinformation and a lot of distrust of experts, it's such an important responsibility to find ways to make all of our science is really exciting to us as individuals, as scientists. But it sometimes takes extra effort to find ways to share that science, not only in a way that's accessible, but also that's fun, and that gets it in front of 100,000 people. So yeah, I'd love to just hear about, maybe further expound on why science communication is important to you and the process of bringing these multiple aspects of yourself to your science communication.
Yeah, I will share just on the dance for your PhD thing. I actually didn't tell my supervisor that I had done that until I won, because I was like, I don't know how this will be received by academia, by the
Conventional,
community. Yeah, because it
totally.
does. I don't know if it's the exact same across disciplines, but I do feel a slight pressure to be this academic, to be a professional, a person who does science. And I think I had a model of what a scientist was in my mind. And when I was making the, dance your PhD thing, in retrospect, we can say, oh yeah, this is a great science communication thing. But I didn't think that was me doing something with my scientist hat on. It felt like me doing something with my musician hat on, with my swing dancing hat on, but definitely didn't feel like this is part of my work as an academic. And it's only now that, okay, I did that thing and then I got recognized for it. Then my supervisor was, super happy, and he was, he was congratulating me. But I don't know how that would have been received before it was lauded by the outside community. And it's only now that I'm able to like kind of just be like, oh yeah, I'm comfortable doing these things that are non-traditional. And I definitely think it's part of the process of being a scientist. It's not me writing journal articles that will be then put behind a paywall, never to be seen by anybody outside the academic, ivory tower. But yeah, for many early career people, I think it is actively discouraged, if not to do these kind of things. And I think that's something that we really need to change. And like you alluded to before, this kind of misinformation that we're seeing in the outside world can be traced to somewhat of our lack of communicating science at the basic level and building trust within communities outside of the scientific academia bubble. I think if people had more ready connections available before a pandemic happened or something happened, to trusted scientific authorities, and they've built that relationship of like, oh, I've built trust. I think there's a lot of things that we could alleviate and like all these problems that we're seeing by just doing that. So I think it's super important. I think we need to actually change culture in academia to reward this and make sure people aren't doing this outside of their time in academia, that we are carving time inside academia to do these things. And you know what? It's not, and it's beneficial for the people consuming all of the science communication activities, but it's also so beneficial for us as scientists to do this. I just connect with my work so much more. It's very hard to sometimes personally connect with something that is so far outside of your, again, length scales and time scales. I'm talking about things that are so tiny that you'll never be able to see them with your eyes. They happen so fast, you'll never be able to experience them with your senses. It takes time to develop a relationship with your subject matter. And the more things that you can engage with, I think it gives you different ways of understanding the thing that you're studying. And so I don't think we should be shutting out any of these avenues of understanding the things that we're privileged enough to study. So I think it's important that we engage in all of these different ways, this diversity of knowing our subject matter. And the benefits, I think, are more numerous than I can get into. And it's actually very personal to my field as well, because I feel like condensed matter physics, I mean, I had to explain what it was to you and to, I guess, whoever will, the audience of this video. I had to motivate that. And then I think about all of the other areas of physics and whatnot that people don't have to spend time motivating why their subject is important, because people have taken the time, great scientists have taken the time to get the ideas out there using different methods. Particle physicists don't end up spending a lot of time talking about why we should study particles, because the public already knows that this is a cool thing to do and we should do it. But I have to spend a whole lot of time motivating it, storytelling, just to even get to the feet of the problem that I am hoping to study. And so, yeah, it's very personal for me, because I'm like, damn it, condensed matter physicist, you did not do your homework. You didn't explain to the public why this is important. And now to spend all this time, both in my grant writing, when I apply for a scholarship, I have to like start at, oh, here are the things that we study. Here is why it's important. Anyway, so that's a little chip on my shoulder within the physics community, where I'm like, condensed matter physics got a raw deal, even though apparently we make up more than 50% of all physicists in the world. Most of the physicists in the world are in an area that almost nobody knows about.
Yeah,
What a tragedy. Like that
it
is
is.
a failure in marketing ourselves. And it's not because of its a lack of amazing things going on in my field. It's not a lack of stories because, oh, every day I come across some like amazing story in condensed matter physics where I'm like, somebody should write about this because this
Yes.
is so cool. Anyway, I think there
So
are
for
more.
any science journalists listening, reach out to Pramodh. He's got a whack of stories for you.
I will tell you, oh man, there are many things, and I have my own projects that I'm hoping to do sometime in the future in these areas.
Amazing. I just want to, yeah, take a moment to soak in and emphasize some of the awesome things you just shared, because there are so many things I feel on a day-to-day basis. And I'm in a field, a discipline that I think it's decent attention that the why isn't, well, sometimes you have to convince people of the why of conservation, but certainly less than the why of condensed matter physics. Um, and yet, still in my field, while science communication is more and more understood as important to graduate students, and I'm at a pretty progressive institution when it comes to that, academia is really siloed, and there's this massive pressure and momentum to be purely academic, to fit into the molds that already exist in academia, which are largely white and male and, cishet and all of those other things that, and privileged and wealthy, and that don't fit the picture of the diversity of humans on this planet. And part of that comes with this idea that in science, you're supposed to be very serious and speak to other scientists. And I still feel vulnerable sometimes, doing interviews about broad topics outside of my discipline or posting on social media, because there's a perception that if you're not spending every moment on your academic research, anything not directly related to publishing must not be important to a scientific career. And I think that's changing, but I think you're really right that a hope is that we can build systems in academia that explicitly reward students and profs and researchers for work, sharing their science with the public, because it's fundamental. It's why attain new knowledge if we're not going to share it with humanity. But we're not quite there yet. So blazing new trails via dancing about physics, I think, is one way to move the needle. And I'm grateful for all your work, especially in the physics realm, because I think you're right that disciplines across universities and universities themselves all are in such different cultural places, even though they're under this sort of like academic culture. And I think physics is one where, yeah, the expectation is to be stoic and composed and deep in your workspace all the time rather than out in the world sharing your work. But
Yeah.
it is neat in that you've kind of come full circle. Had you not been read stories by someone who was really interested in making their physics attainable and accessible and exciting, you may not be on the career path you're on. So you're creating a world where other little kids can access physics and become scientists down the line. So I love that. And I'm very excited to see what more you have to come. And also recognize that, yeah, as academics, we're walking this fine line between like sleeping at night and having time for our hobbies, but also bringing our whole selves to our work, bringing our music, bringing our art, bringing whatever to science communication. So it's a delicate balance, and I hope you're getting plenty of rest and eating delicious food and all those things. But but I'm really grateful for all you do, Pramodh, and grateful for your time today. Any last thoughts for folks listening, or any last party notes that you wish everyone knew about your work?
Ooh. I wouldn't say, yeah, I have any parting words of wisdom. But I would say there are lots of, I guess, new avenues where you can learn about physics and how research is done, going outside this kind of pop science that like cycles that we can get into. I'd like to maybe recommend, if anyone is interested in physics and research as we do it now, Quantum Magazine is a great magazine that is actually reporting on the stuff that physicists do instead of, quantum woo, whatever that is. There's a lot of quantum woo out there. If you want the actual, why physics is interesting, go check out Quantum Magazine. I I hopefully have some new science communication projects coming out. So if you're interested in seeing that, you can reach me on Twitter and you can find it there. I'm specifically going to shout out my friend Roshan, who you also know, Lauren. He is also doing some really cool science communication work in condensed matter, low temperature kind of physics. And he co-wrote a children's book about Santa, and we are hopefully working on a part 2 of that for this Christmas as well. So go check out the early Santa the Scientist children's book, and then maybe in a couple of months you can also see the next edition of the Santa the Scientist, learn some science, and also have some fun doing it along the way.
Amazing. So rad. I'm obsessed with all of it. I'll link all of this in the show notes under this video for anyone interested on following Pramodh along or learning more. And I just want to thank you again for your time and all you do. And it's great to see you and catch up.
Thank you so much, Lauren. This was a great conversation. And I can't wait to see who else is going to be on your program. It's definitely going to broaden the horizons of me and all your audience as well.
Amazing. Thanks so much. And thanks everyone for watching.